Hello and welcome back to my channel. I'm awfully glad you're here. Thanks very much for stopping by. If you're new here, welcome. You know, in previous videos, we've talked about tea versus tisanes or herbal teas, and tea in bags versus loose leaf tea. Today, I thought we would just finally make a proper pot of tea, no matter which one of those you like. So first you want to start with a clean teapot, an electric kettle to heat the water or one on the stovetop, your choice of tea, a measuring spoon for your tea, a teacup or a mug if you'd like, a strainer if using loose leaf tea, and a teaspoon for stirring, then sweetener if you'd like, and milk or lemon slices if you'd like to add that. So when it comes to the water you use, the most important thing is that it should be fresh. You don't want to reboil your water. Boiling water removes the oxygen, and if you reboil it, then you're just going to take out more oxygen and you'll end up with flat tasting water, which will affect the taste of your tea. Next is your tea selection. Whether you pick black, green, oolong, or herbal, that will impact how hot you get your water. Some teas need water to be boiled, others don't. No matter what tea you pick, somewhere on the packaging there should be directions for both water temperature and steep time. Now some teas steep for as little as 1 minute, others go as long as 10. Check your directions. Now, since I'm having English breakfast tea, which is a pure black tea, I'll be bringing the water to boil and letting it steep for 4 to 5 minutes. Now I'm using a teacup today, but you could use a mug if you like. A little quirk of mine is that during the week, I use a mug every day until I get to Friday. And on Fridays, I like to switch to a teacup and saucer because it kind of reminds me to relax. We're going into the weekend. Let's chill. Now, what, if anything, would you like in your tea? For sweeteners, there is, of course, sugar, honey, any number of natural and artificial sweeteners. If you're having guests over, sugar in cubes is a nice touch. Then there's the option of adding milk or lemon. I prefer milk in most of my tea. Notice that I said milk and not cream. Cream in my coffee, absolutely. But in my tea, Cream, half and half, those are too heavy. They have too strong of a flavor. It will overpower the tea. Reduced fat or 2% milk is a really great option. It's a nice balance of flavor between milk and tea. And of course, if you prefer, a slice of lemon works really well in most teas, but you don't want to have lemon and milk together. That will end up in a curdling situation. One interesting note is that Earl Grey is flavored with oil of bergamot, which is a citrus fruit, a little bit like an orange, even though it doesn't have an orangey flavor in Earl Grey. But because of that, a lot of people think that only lemon should be used in Earl Grey. But I find that it pairs very well with milk, and that's how I always drink it. Now let's turn on the kettle and get brewing. Now, my water isn't boiling yet, but as it's already somewhat hot, I'm going to pour a little of it into my empty teapot because it's important to warm the pot first. The temperature of your water is important, and pouring it into a cold teapot will drop that temperature. A warm pot helps maintain it. I'm going to swirl that around a little bit before pouring it out. I'm going to put my water back on to boil while I add the tea to the warmed pot. In measuring tea, the rule is 1 spoonful per cup, but when making tea in a pot, you need 1 extra spoonful. So for today, 1 for me, and 1 for the pot. If you're using tea bags, the rule is the same. 1 bag per person, plus 1 for the pot. Now once the water comes to a boil, you want to take it off and pour it over your tea. Don't let the water sit there and boil for a while, because the longer it boils, the more oxygen is removed from the water and the flavor won't be as good. By the way, when it comes to green tea, those leaves are more delicate because they haven't been oxidized, and pouring boiling water over them will burn them and leave you with a bitter tasting tea. Instead, you can bring the water to boil and then let it cool down for 3 or 4 minutes before pouring it over the leaves. So we'll let that go for a few minutes and come back. Okay, our tea is steeped. Let's give it a stir and pour a cup. I always like to stir it just a little bit after it's steeped, just to kind of mix things up a little bit. Now I'm using my tea strainer to catch any loose tea leaves. Now I'll add my sugar. And milk. Also, if in doubt, traditionally milk goes in after the tea, not before. You know, in the Downton Abbey era and before, whether you poured your milk in first or last used to be a sign of class. If you owned cheaper cups, you had to pour milk in first to act as a coolant or a barrier, because if the hot tea hit the teacups directly, they were in danger of cracking. But the wealthy could afford fine bone china cups that could take the heat, so putting milk in last became a sign of wealth and refinement. Today, it doesn't really matter. But I think putting the milk in last allows you to see how much you need. You know, I don't put cream in my coffee cup before adding coffee, so, you know, same idea. Now, when it comes to the etiquette of the stir, and yes, believe it or don't, there is such a thing. People naturally stir liquids in a circle, don't we? I mean, that's just what we do. But the tea experts claim a back and forth motion from 12 to 6 is preferred. Some even claim stirring in a circle won't dissolve the sugar. Now, I cry foul on that. I mean, sugar in water, of course it's going to dissolve. But perhaps there is one way that's a little more efficient than the other. So I decided to do an experiment. I used 2 identical mugs and boiled water as I would for tea. Testing each mug separately, I poured up the water in the first one and waited for 4 minutes of what would be steep time, what I would do for my tea. Then I added 2 sugar cubes of identical weight and size. For the first mug, I used the recommended back and forth method for stirring. It took 30 seconds for the sugar to completely dissolve. Then I did the same thing with the other mug. Using fresh water, just off the boil, poured up and waited for 4 minutes of steep time. Only this time stirring in a circle. And not only did the sugar cubes dissolve, which I knew they would, but they dissolved faster by 2 seconds. So, how you stir your tea is not about dissolving sugar, it's about noise, not making any. It's about being that guest or not being that guest who clangs their spoon against the side of the china cup by stirring in a circle. Etiquette is not meant to embarrass or make someone feel out of place, even though some people use it for that. Etiquette is really about being polite. It's about having manners, but having those manners in a most logical and practical way. So if you want to stir your tea in a circle, I say do it. But just be quiet about it. And there you have it, a perfect cup of tea from a proper teapot. I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you had, hit that like button and give it a thumbs up. And consider subscribing for more tea videos. Until next time, bye-bye.